Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Jan Bernstein Chargin. How are you today, Jan?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to the show. I'm so excited that you're on the show with us today. You're going to be sharing some information about a really, really important topic, and that is the topic of homelessness. And it is a very complex and multifaceted subject. And so we're going to be exploring some of those things today. And I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. But let's get started with how did you get started in this area? Because it wasn't initially what you were doing, say out of college and starting into your career. So tell us about it.
It's definitely not something I set out to do in college. Never would have occurred to me at that point. My career path was definitely not a straight line. And I like to always share with young people that it doesn't have to be. That's okay. You find your place and all of your experiences add up to who you become. After I got a job out of college that moved me from New York to California, and I was working in San Jose as a manufacturing supervisor at Frito-Lay. After a few years of that, it looked like they would have wanted me to move to another plant, a different location. And I just felt like this isn't me. And I'm an artist. So I thought, this is my time. I'm going to stop, take art classes and be a struggling artist for a while. So I did that. At one point in that journey, and a lot of things happened. I wound up living out of a studio I rented, which was not a place that was suitable for human habitation. In other words, homeless. I was living in a place. I was lucky. I had electricity. I had access to a bathroom, but I was in a metal Quonset hut that flooded, that power went out, that was dirty. I was kind of outside of mainstream life and expectations in any place I expected to be, and learned a lot about how very difficult it is, and what happens to you once you kind of are out of mainstream functioning. I went through a several years period, and I made my career change by getting involved with some of the arts organizations first, learning about nonprofits through being a volunteer at an art gallery. I was taking classes. I took a part-time job as the coordinator of an art gallery at West Valley College. I was the gallery coordinator there. I started doing a little fundraising, got to like coordinating volunteers, became a volunteer coordinator at Envision, which is now called Life Moves. And I started with a part-time job there. I was still unhoused myself, but I was working as the volunteer coordinator and the resource coordinator there. And I got a lot of kudos to Christine Burrows, who was the executive director at that time, who gave me a chance. Despite everything, let me be the director of public relations for Envision for a number of years. And that really put me on a whole new career path, let me know about nonprofits. I left for Envision. I left and became the director of public information at Gavilan College, where I stayed for 21 years and just retired at the end of December. So in that journey, I never really lost the calling for addressing homelessness and people who were struggling in that situation. About 2010, I got involved with the Gilroy Homeless Task Force. And a year later, a man walked into that task force and asked us if we could start a shelter, and he would donate some space. And that was Jim Currier. And then we formed a new nonprofit, and the Gilroy Compassion Center was born. Now the South County Compassion Center, which runs programs in Morgan Hill as well. And I stayed there as the acting executive director, as a volunteer and board member for 8 or 9 years. That was going. And then during the pandemic, we saw a need, me and some other formerly unhoused people with lived experience. We saw a need, as all of the indoor services closed, to get people food and to let them know they weren't forgotten, and to interact and do outreach as peers and as peer mentors, not as service provider to client, not as helper to person being helped, but as just one person to another, equal level. So we formed PitStop Outreach, where the majority of people involved have had some lived experience, and we do meals. We bring meals out to camps and people on the street and in cars 5 nights a week. We do continue weekend outreach events. We work with other agencies, and we try to be there as a kind of moral support for people who are trying to get housing. I'm also on the board of Destination Home, and that's the solution: building housing, getting people into affordable housing. But we know it takes a long time. They need support while they're waiting and while we're building.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's great stuff, Jan, what you're doing. I mean, I had no idea that transition that you made from a job at Frito-Lay, as you said, and then getting into the art world, and what that path led you to. And really, it sounds like it changed the entire trajectory of your life. And now what you're doing in helping with these different nonprofit organizations and the number of people that you're helping is just, it's wonderful. That's awesome. I want to talk a little bit about that, peer-to-peer support just for a minute, because I think that brings up such a great point, is that there's often a disconnect, right? Because the people who want to help have never experienced what the people who need the help have been through. But when you have a peer, they can speak right to, the heart of it. Like, I've been where you are, I've been through this. And I think that makes such a huge difference in getting through to people, right?
Yes. And to let people know, yes, this process that we're about to put you through in housing, it's awful. It's terrible. But, we get that. And you just got to hang on and keep going. And it's good to give back. Once you've been there, you don't ever really want to forget people. So, we've definitely had people who are even still currently unhoused helping with deliveries or helping out with different aspects. We've done encampment cleanups, and we try to provide opportunities for people to get involved, because somebody once said, we want to play too. And just because, but you don't have as many opportunities to do that sometimes when you're struggling for your own survival.
Yeah, because as we know, there's those basic needs that we have, and if those aren't even being met, there's very little that we can do above and beyond that. But that you've got those individuals who are capable and are willing to do it. That's awesome. And so it leads me to something we talked about before we started, and that's how there is so many myths and so many misconceptions. And as I said at the beginning, how this is such a complex and really multifaceted conversation, because, we could be talking about people are homeless because of lack of affordable housing. They could be homeless because of maybe their mental health issues aren't being resolved, or they're not being helped in that way. So let's talk about some of those myths and misconceptions a little bit.
I think the biggest one is that people don't want help, or that people like the lifestyle and they really just don't want a place to live. They're happy and having fun. And that's not the case, and we do surveys. I'm not saying that one guy isn't out there, right? But with, I think 170,000 people unhoused in California, that's not 170,000 people who are choosing to sleep in tents along freeways, right? That's not fun. That's not something people are enjoying. They want real places to live. And, turning down an emergency shelter bed is not the same thing as not wanting housing, because you want housing. You might be afraid to take the shelter bed because you're going to give up your spot, not be able to have your stuff, and still have to think about, this is temporary. Where am I going to go when I get out? Yeah. So the long-term, the permanent housing is what's needed. I'm reading a book now that really did a study. It's called Homelessness is a Housing Problem by Greg Colburn and Clayton Page Aldern. And you can't really see it in my thing here, but
there you go.
How structural factors explain U.S. patterns. And, there's a misconception that it's mental illness or drug addiction is causing homelessness. And they take a look at it with data here, and take a look all across the country at the correlation, because mental illness occurs in every state. Substance use disorders occur in every state in the country. And homelessness doesn't correlate with them. Okay? Homelessness correlates with the cost of housing. If you look at the data, okay, the homelessness correlates. Yes, there are addicts. There are people with mental illness. There are people with chronic illnesses. There are people leaving domestic violence situations. There are people leaving foster care. There are people leaving jail all over the country. They're becoming homeless in places where housing is extremely expensive due to the lack of supply. And if you think of it as a game of musical chairs, right? If there are more people than chairs, somebody's going to be left out. Probably the person who is least able to compete for the available chairs.
Right.
So anything that makes you less able to compete can put you on you're going to be the person left out. The only way to get everybody in a chair is to make sure there are enough chairs and that the chairs match the people, right? If all of the chairs are 8 feet high, the person who is 4 feet high is still not going to have a chair because the chair was not designed for that person.
Yeah.
So you not only need the right number of chairs, you need the right chairs. And it's a supply issue. And it's, that's kind of counterintuitive because we think, well, look at all these people and so many people have problems. And yes, and having any kind of personal problems makes you less able to compete for the available housing. And people who've owned their homes for a long time don't understand a lot of things that have changed in the rental market.
That's right.
When I got out of college, you could drive around, look for a now renting sign, knock on the door, meet the person, kind of get them to do this, then you'd fill out a kind of a pro forma application, give them your deposit, and in you go. Now it's a background check, a credit check, right? They have multiple applications coming in. You have to be able to prove, you can't just state your income, you have to prove your income. You have to prove that you've had that income for 2 years. You have to have references. The barriers to housing have gotten a lot harder, a lot higher. And, for people who've owned their homes for decades, they don't realize that market has changed, that the game is played by very different rules right now. So it's hard to rent. If if you have any of the things, bad credit, anything, renters also ask, well, if people have families, because most people stay homeless in the place they were living, housed. They don't travel to be homeless. I'm not saying there aren't a few, but the majority, the overwhelming majority. But the reason family members often can't take people in is because the family members are renters. If you're a renter, you can't just take people in, right? And you can't take them in if they're not going to clear a background check, if they're not going to clear a credit check. Everybody who stays there has to go through the same vetting. So it's a very, very difficult situation. And, we've also see, multiple generations of the same family, all unhoused together. And these family relationships are there. So, I'd say that's the biggest myth, that people don't want housing and that the homelessness is caused by personal behavior. There is a personal component, but that's what makes you most likely to be the homeless person in a situation where somebody inevitably is going to be homeless because there aren't enough homes to go around. The good news about this problem is once we really understand it, that's not rocket science, right? We can actually create the right supply. We do everything to get in our own way and prevent that from happening. But it is a concrete structural problem that can be solved. So I feel hopeful about it, even though it takes time. It's a lot of work. It's going to cost a lot of money, and there's no free way out of this, right? We're years behind in addressing it. I think we've gotten some changes in construction and in some of the regulatory world that's happened at the state level that'll make it easier for California to start addressing the supply shortage. And I'd say, people, when your government proposes some low-income housing near you, don't fight it. That's what's needed. All right. That's for your nursing assistants. That is for the people who serve as classroom aides in your school. That is for the person who made you coffee. That is for the person who is tending the lawn. That is for people who with disabilities. That is for seniors. That is for people who are just like you, but without as much money. So, let's have a community that includes all of us.
You know what? I want you to say that again, because I don't think you can stress it enough that people are misunderstanding what low income housing is. So say it again, please.
Okay. Low income housing is for people who, low income housing is for people you already see every day. It is for the person who checked you out at the grocery store. It is for the person who cleaned your house. It is for the person who is working in the yard at your kid's school. Low income housing is for people who are working in retail and service jobs and in healthcare and in education and are a part and in a very important part of our community. It's for people who we called essential workers 2 years ago, who kept coming to work every day. This is who low-income housing is for. And you know what? It's also for some people who can't work. It's for people who are disabled. It is for people who are retired without a pension. It is for the person who worked for 20 years at a job that didn't provide a pension. It is for the person who has a disability. It is for the person who just aged out of foster care and is at their first job, but doesn't have family support to help them get started. That's what low-income housing is. It's for the family that just left a domestic violence situation and is starting over. That's what low-income housing is. And that's us. That's everybody knows somebody who fits into the category. This is with Silicon Valley, and here in South County, we are measured in terms of income against the entirety of Silicon Valley. But the truth is, we still have agriculture. We have retail, we have service jobs. A lot of the people who make our South County communities go are considered low income by Silicon Valley standards. And that's small business owners in many cases. One low income housing project went up in Gilroy, and we realized 40% of the workers in Gilroy didn't earn enough to live there.
Wow.
We needed very low income. We need extremely low income housing, because what's considered low income in Santa Clara County might be considered, upper middle income someplace else. So,
Yeah.
and if we can't just keep driving people farther and farther afield, because that hollows out our communities.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for
welcome.
restating that, because that is such a misconception, I think, that people have, and a fear that they have, that because they just don't understand. And so thank you again for restating that, because those people, as you said, are essential workers. We cannot do without them.
Right.
We cannot do without anybody in our community. We are all together in this. We all serve a purpose, and we've got to be there to support them as they supported us, and we've got to support each other, right?
Yes.
So
Yep. Communities, all of us. So thank you for the opportunity to say that.
Yeah.
To bring that out.
Excellent. And so I want to just switch a little bit and bring up something. You ran recently for the city council in Gilroy. And so I'd love to hear more about that, and what that experience was like, and what kind of prompted you to do that. What was it that spurred you?
So it was an incredible experience. I have to say that I am very grateful for having done it, and the people who supported me, and the people I got to talk to and meet, and who shared with me the things that they hoped to see and needed in their city. I always stay very politically active and aware, and I decided to run one day at a city council meeting where homelessness and people who were unhoused were being discussed in a way that I felt was very disrespectful and not helpful, not going to help us solve the problem. And I thought, I can run, and I may not win, but I can hopefully change the tone of this conversation. And I think that we were able to do that to a large extent. But there's more to be done. It was disappointing. I think I learned a lot. I tend to learn by doing. I'm a try it, let's see what happens kind of person. So I think if I were to try again, I would come in much better armed and with knowledge about what to do to make it a successful campaign. And I'm not going to eliminate that as an option going forward.
Oh, excellent. That's great to hear. And I love that you pointed out that you learned so much, and now you would know what to do next time. I think that's the key to so many things in life in general is you try, that's that trial and error. You maybe didn't get it that time, but you learned so much more, and you can come at it from a different angle or whatever. And you've got that knowledge to back you up. And that's fantastic.
Yeah. That's it. Somebody told me once, you just dust yourself off, keep walking. You've got a lot more information now than you had going into it. I had some great experiences, and there were people who told me, and it really touched my heart, that they voted for the first time in their lives because I was running, and that meant a lot to me, and it let me know that it was worth doing, because there are people who don't have a voice.
That's amazing, because how important voting is. I mean, I want everybody, absolutely everybody. And I talk to my kids about this, and I'm like, talk to your friends about this. And my daughter, who's not even 18 yet, is pre-registered to vote. And, she's talking to her friends about it. And really, because there's nothing more important than voting and being involved in that and knowing what is going on, especially at local levels, right? Because you've got more
Yes.
control over what happens in your city, your town, your
Mhm.
community, at
Yes.
that level. Of course, it matters at the state
Right.
level, and in the country with,
Mhm.
voting for the president. Of course, that's important too. But
Yes.
the local level, you can make such a difference and have such an impact on everything.
Yes. And you can vote for people you know that you have access to and really be a part of running your own community. And
Right.
that is power at the local level. And everybody can have a piece of that just by getting involved.
Yeah.
Hooray for your
Excellent.
kids for doing that.
Yeah. Well, thank
Yeah.
you for that. Let's talk a little bit about your time at the Gavilan College and as a director there. And so tell us what you were able to do, there at that, because that is a local community college for us
Yes.
here in the South County. And so tell us about that.
I feel like I was one of the luckiest people in the county. I got to have an 8-minute commute for 21 years doing important work in a beautiful place with fabulous people. And, it doesn't get any better than that. And community colleges are really the unsung heroes of our state. That's the largest system of public education in the world is the California community college system. It gives everybody an opportunity. And Gavilan College is a real gem. The first time I stepped onto that campus and saw how beautiful it was, I thought, wow. Never would have known. And to get to work there and see the changes and the things we got to be a part of. For years we had a TV channel, and I got to reach out to the public through our public access channel. And when I started working there was no social media. We did print ads and carried things back and forth on floppy disks. And by the time I left, it was all social media. And to see though that the education continues. There's a fabulous faculty there. And I went to a very large university as a freshman, and I envied the students at Gavilan College who were in a classroom of only 20 students right there with their professor, not in a 800-person freshman lecture hall. That the instructors cared. The whole time I was there, I never missed a graduation because it's such fabulous, impactful celebrations, and such an impact on the community. Two of my kids went to GECA there on the campus as their high school and graduated with their associate degrees, and then transferred the credits and went to university. And I would encourage everybody to, my goodness, take your first 2 years at the community college, or at least take some classes, learn how to do college. There's a great resource here. It's a lot less expensive, and you can get a start on your education. And so I just feel I'm very grateful that I was allowed to do that for 20 years.
Yeah.
It was good. And again, met wonderful people, and people who worked there and the students who came through. And I got to see so many people come through as students, and now I see them out there in the professional world. And that's neat.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. And, you said that the junior colleges are the unsung heroes, and I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I went my first, actually 3 years to De Anza Community College before transferring to a Cal State. Now the students who go in straight away have the opportunity to get those first 2 years for free, right?
Yes.
So that's even more
amazing.
Phenomenal.
And then transfer, and then you have a university degree. You go in and you already know how to be a college student, which is a big transition from being a high school student.
Absolutely.
And again, you've got your first 2 years where you actually know your professors, So, I can't say enough about that, but I encourage everybody who's thinking about college to not dismiss your local community college, and anybody who's thinking about getting retrained, any adults thinking, you know what, I'm ready to move on in my career. That's the place to go do it. And,
absolutely. That's a great point that you bring up, is that change into a different career. We've been seeing a lot of things happening with employment, right? With job cutbacks and whatever. And the community colleges are a great place to go learn new skills that, can put you in an entirely different field if you choose, or just give you additional education that puts you in a position to maybe go after a different job that requires a higher education.
Yeah. And they've added a lot of online learning, on March 17th, 2020, when everything had to shut down, we took the entire curriculum from in-person to 100% online in 3 days. What I found out, since leaving, is a lot of students now like that hybrid approach. They want to take some of their classes
Yeah.
in person and some of them online. And what a great thing to be able to offer people and people who are working. And we've all kind of learned how to do this Zoom thing and to be in different places at once. And, I think we got we went through a terrible time there with the pandemic, but we also learned things, all of us, about how we can use technology to not just have fun, but to relate and to talk to each other and help each other without being in the same room.
Yeah. And learn. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about, we're going to kind of switch gears and talk now a little bit more about the nonprofits that you started. You were co-founder of 2 nonprofits. Is that correct? And what are they, and are they still running?
Okay. So the first one was Gilroy Compassion Center, which is now South County Compassion Center. And it is still running and doing a fabulous job. That was started, again, because I was on this task force, and one day a man named Jim Courier walked in with all these binders and said he had an empty warehouse. And this was during the recession, the Great Recession. Couldn't rent out his big empty warehouse that needed to be renovated. A lot of people were out of work. I think this is 2010. He said, look, I'll donate this warehouse for 5 years if you can put a year-round shelter in it. Because at the time, all South County had was the Gilroy Armory, which was only in the cold weather months, just mats on the floor. Everybody had to be out 6 a.m. It was not what the community needed. We formed kind of a core group. We looked at different ways to do it, but okay, we'll form our own organization to do this. And we formed a new nonprofit, and the Gilroy Foundation stepped up as our fiscal sponsor for the first 6 months so we could get our grounding. And we first set out to renovate a building and create a shelter. And that turned out to be a bigger nightmare than anybody. That was the overnight shelter part. That was beyond us. That building was not going to ever be a shelter, but we were able to make it a day center. We were able to provide the daytime services, a place for people to come where they'd be welcomed. And, at first, when it was all volunteer run, it was come on in, here's a coffee pot. We would print out the housing listings from Craigslist, the job listings from Craigslist, for people without computers, post them out, let people use our phone, have a bathroom, donated clothes. It was very simple. It was a day center for a few years. Then we added something called the camping program. And we started helping people get off the street by going to camp in our county campgrounds. And we had private donors who paid the camping fees. And for several years, there was a team of people that drove people to county campgrounds. And that camping program kind of became a model, for different things that happened around the county. And eventually that gave us the experience to then partner with the city of Morgan Hill and Morgan Hill Bible Church and create the safe parking program, which is still operating and still helping families have a transitional spot to get off the street. Then Compassion Center grew and eventually became funded by the county with some actual paid staff, some county grants, paid staff, and a partner to Santa Clara County's continuum of care for homelessness, which means they could help people get into the county database that's used to prioritize people for housing. And that became the gift. I think what I heard is that just this year, since July, 150 people from our streets have been just here in Gilroy have gotten into housing through that system.
That's great.
The Compassion Center is still going strong. We started PitStop outreach, like I said, during the pandemic. Me and some other folks who'd been involved at the Compassion Center, Sam Brown, Melissa Kubangbang, Sean Weymouth, who has since passed away, Tony Menino, and a woman named Vanessa Ashford, who has since joined our board. And it is an all-volunteer grassroots effort. I'm very passionate about what we can do on the grassroots, just by stepping up and saying, who wants to do this crazy thing with me? And then see who comes along, and people come along. I'm very grateful for Martha's Kitchen, which is a large nonprofit kitchen in San Jose, which has supplied all of our food. And for the people who believed in what we were doing right away, Tony Bowles at the Neon Exchange, who I cold called, had never met her, and said, Tony, here's what we want to do. We need a place to package this donated food so we can take it out to homeless encampments. And she said, okay, and let us... And so she gave us a chance there to start, and we're grateful to the Neon Exchange. Then our second year was spent at the Veterans Hall in Gilroy. Many thanks to Gilroy Veterans Hall and Christine West for making that happen. We then were hosted by the New Hope Church and the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the other locations that allowed us to come in and package meals a couple of days a week. And then finally in April, we were able to rent our own space. So this is a growing, it's exciting. It's starting a nonprofit has been definitely easier the second time around. Again, learn on the first one.
That's right.
Second time you have a roadmap. So, this one, we're very much, committed to people with lived experience, people sharing their experience, giving people a way to step up and to participate. Because we know it's good for the soul. It helps you when you're in difficult times to be able to contribute and do something for somebody else.
Yeah.
And, I learned that. And then, Sam Brown, his nickname is Pit. So he's the Pit in PitStop Outreach. So we invite other people to do that too. And whether they do it for once in a while, for a period of months, for years, it's wonderful. And then we've gotten to bring young people in because high schools require community service, and we provide opportunities for service just in coming to our headquarters and packing the meals and learning a little bit about what we do. And,
That's awesome.
Again, I think that the best thing about this kind of work is it does good, and you meet wonderful people because you meet the people who also want to do that kind of work. And I think back to my first job out of college and why it didn't resonate with me. There's nothing wrong with what I was doing. It just didn't give me the feeling that it mattered.
Right.
That just doing it for me wasn't enough for me.
Yeah. It wasn't giving you any kind of that give back, like you said, what that does for you. There was no passion behind what you were doing in that job, but with what you're doing now, it's the passion that's behind it, the fulfillment that you get from it. It's 100%. You can hear that in talking with you right now, for sure. I want to ask though, is there a way that if people who are listening, if they could help in the with the nonprofit in terms of actually volunteering or donating or anything like that? Is there a way that we could do that?
We've got a website, www.pitstopoutreach.org, and you can volunteer. You can find out a little bit more about what we do. We need volunteers who can package meals, who can bring them out. We need donors who can donate clothing. I mean, right now, everybody's blankets are getting wet. Everybody's blankets are getting soaked, and we're going to need more blankets. We're going to need maybe somebody to donate a day in the laundromat to just stay there with quarters and help people wash and dry their blankets, because otherwise everything's going to get moldy and have to be replaced. We need people who can be there at city council meetings when topics that affect the unhoused come up, so that the council knows that the leaders know that it's important. And we definitely need donations. If I could say, a monetary donation helps us pay the rent. We don't have staff, but paying the rent, buying forks and emergency supplies for people, that's really important. There have been times we don't do it a lot, but we've put people in, motel rooms when something, when they've been recovering from a medical condition or when something has happened, and used an Uber account to send people to court and to, medical appointments and housing appointments. Sometimes people aren't able to apply for housing because we can get them assistance sometimes with the deposit and everything, but not the fee for the application fee and the background check. And if you're living on the edge, that's a lot of money. If you're trying to apply to 4 or 5 different places,
absolutely,
that adds up into something you don't have. So donating gas cards, people can get to appointments, getting involved. I'm always happy to give people a tour and a talk and invite them to come in and see what we're doing.
Fantastic.
Everybody can be involved. And that's
Wonderful.
what I'd say that the most important thing is everybody has something to give. Even sometimes, I'll be going out and delivering meals, and the one person who comes out and, if I stop at a location where there are multiple tents, the one person who comes out and says, I'll bring them out to everybody. You don't have to go, out there, and people participate as much as they can, or, coming up to the clothing thing, grab something for somebody else. And I always thank them for helping others too. I can't do it alone. None of us can do this alone, but every person can pick up just a little piece, and that gets it done.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's an expression, and I'm going to probably get it completely wrong, but it's about, heavy lifting and many hands, with a difficult task and, whatever.
Right.
I can't put it all together right now in my head. It's not coming out, but, it's just the idea of, a difficult task with many hands is easily done.
That's
something
right.
like that.
Many hands. I think it's many hands make work light. And
there you go. Yeah.
and everybody, and there's a small piece. If you break it down enough, you break down the biggest problem, there's a small piece of it that you can do.
That's right. Yeah.
So, and I love matching people with those pieces.
Excellent. Well, to wrap up our talk, you had shown us a book earlier, and I would love to hear any recommendations that you have of books that you think would be beneficial for people to pick up, check out at the library. Share those with us.
Okay. So that first one I talk about is Homelessness is a Housing Problem by Greg Colburn and Clayton Page Aldern. About how structural factors explain U.S. housing problems. Another one I'm reading now is called Decolonizing Wealth, Indigenous Wisdom to Heal Divides and Restore Balance. And it's by Edgar Villanueva. He's somebody who is active in philanthropy and started then to take a look at the whole philanthropy field and see how, even with the best intentions, you might be perpetuating a system of oppression.
Right.
How do we reimagine it to give voices to the people? One of the things, I'm on the board of Destination Home, and one of the things we have is the Lived Experience Advisory Board, which is composed of people who have lived experience being unhoused, of using the services that we fund.
Right.
And whose voices are increasingly needed, listened to, powerful. How do people who want to help make sure that the people we're trying to help are the first people we ask, what do you need?
Yes.
Instead of assuming that they don't know what they need, right? They know what they need.
Right.
How do we bring those voices in, and how do we help with people instead of at them?
Yeah. Great point.
So I'm really getting a lot out of that. I highly recommend both of these.
Fantastic. Excellent recommendations. Yes. Thank you for sharing those. And this has been such a wonderful conversation, Jan. I thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing with us your experience, and your knowledge and the information has just been tremendous. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for the opportunity. You're very welcome.
Wonderful. Well, we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks so much.